The air hung thick and cold, tasting of metal and forgotten fear. I drifted, a phantom limb in a body that wasn't quite my own, through a dim hospital hallway with no staff, machines quietly breathing. Each inhale of the unseen apparatus was a soft, rhythmic sigh, a mechanical pulse in the sterile silence. A profound sense of displacement, of being utterly lost, clung to me like a shroud. The metallic tang in the air gave way to mildew, dust, and the ghosts of wood smoke. My eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the gloom of the great hall, a space where time itself seemed to have slowed to a crawl, caught in the warp and weft of decaying tapestries and dust-shrouded furniture. I was back. Or rather, I had never left. The fleeting image of the hallway, a waking dream, dissolved like smoke, leaving only a lingering residue of unease. I was Reid, a man whose life had been a meticulous excavation of the past, mapping its contours with unwavering precision. I sought the truth of the land, the unvarnished reality etched into parchment and stone. But this inheritance, this sprawling, decaying ancestral estate, felt less like a truth and more like a carefully constructed lie. The solicitor's letter, crisply formal against the backdrop of my quiet, ordered life, had been an unwelcome disruption. A distant relative, a name barely remembered, had passed, leaving me the sole inheritor of a property so remote it seemed to exist on the very edge of the world, a forgotten blotch on any modern chart. The journey here had been a descent into isolation, the paved roads giving way to gravel, then to little more than overgrown tracks that clawed their way through a dense, ancient forest. The house itself, a hulking silhouette against a perpetually bruised sky, loomed with the weight of centuries. Its stone facade was pocked and scarred, its windows like vacant eyes staring out over a landscape that felt watchful. My days since arriving had been a methodical exploration, a cartographer's survey of a different kind. I walked the creaking floorboards, cataloging the strange assortment of heirlooms, tarnished silver, brittle lace, portraits whose eyes seemed to follow my every move. The air in the study, where I spent most of my time, was thick with the scent of aged paper and leather-bound secrets. It was here, tucked away in a neglected chest beneath a stack of ledgers detailing long-forgotten agricultural yields, that I found it. It was not a scroll, nor a simple sheet. The edges were ragged, softened by time, but the ink, a deep, rich sepia, remained startlingly vibrant. My fingers, accustomed to the delicate touch required for antique documents, traced the lines with an almost reverent caution. This was no ordinary survey. The detail was extraordinary, breathtaking even. Every rise and fall of the estate's land, every ancient oak, every winding stream was rendered with an almost obsessive fidelity. I recognized landmarks, the gnarled twin oaks by the north field, the collapsed stone wall bordering the marsh. The map was incomplete. Not simply torn, but unfinished. Great swaths of the property, particularly those extending into the deepest parts of the surrounding woods, simply ceased, the intricate lines dissolving into blank parchment. And what was there? It was unsettling. My trained eye immediately registered anomalies. There were structures depicted that did not exist on any modern survey, nor in any historical record I had ever encountered. A series of concentric circles, meticulously drawn, marked a point deep within the forest, where the blankness began. Scattered across the estate, small, unfamiliar symbols peppered the landscape, spirals, jagged angles, glyphs that resonated with something ancient and disquieting, like forgotten sigils. They were too precise to be decorative, too consistent to be random. My professional curiosity, a force as strong and steady as a surveyor's plumb line, ignited. This was a puzzle of monumental proportions, a cartographic enigma. Who had drawn this? Why was it incomplete? And what did these strange markings signify? This map wasn't just old, it felt wrong. It hummed with a quiet, unsettling energy, demanding to be finished, to reveal the secrets it so tantalizingly withheld. A key to something buried beneath it, something that had been waiting, patiently, for a cartographer to finally complete its terrible design. The growl was gone, replaced by the persistent, mournful creak of old timbers in the wind. The metallic tang of the dream hallway dissolved into the damp, earthy scent of decay that permeated my ancestral estate. I lay tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, the last tendrils of the nightmare clinging to my mind like cobwebs. The inherited map, its parchment brittle and its inks faded, lay open on the nightstand, a silent accusation. The map called to me, a silent challenge. I pulled on sturdy boots and a heavy canvas jacket, the worn fabric a familiar comfort against the estate's ceaseless damp. With the map tucked into a waterproof pouch, and a compass in hand, I stepped out into the overgrown wilds of the property. The estate land was a labyrinth of neglect. Brambles clotted my trousers, and the skeletal branches of ancient trees formed a canopy so dense that even at midday, the forest floor remained cloaked in a perpetual twilight. My cartographer's eye, trained to read the land, immediately registered the dissonance. The contours depicted on the faded parchment were subtly, yet profoundly, different from the terrain beneath my feet. I began at the north border, tracing the line where the map indicated an old stone wall, now swallowed by ivy and moss. But a quarter-mile further, the map showed a rectangular structure, marked with a cryptic symbol that no modern deed or survey had ever noted. I pushed through a thicket of gnarled hawthorn, the thorns tearing at my jacket, and found it. Not a ruin, not quite. It was a low, squat building, its dry stone walls indistinguishable from the surrounding rock face, save for the precise, unnatural angles where they met. My breath plumed faintly before me, a ghost sigh. I knelt, peering into the opening. A smell, like wet earth and something else, something metallic, like the dream hallway's lingering taste, wafted out. I moved on, the image of that root-choked mouth gnawing at my periphery. Further south, near a sluggish creek, the map indicated a series of 3 standing stones. I found them, not aligned in any astronomical or agricultural pattern I recognized, but forming a jagged, irregular triangle. The stones themselves were rough-hewn, devoid of markings, but their surfaces were unnaturally smooth, almost slick, despite the dry weather. It reverberated up my legs, settling in my chest, a disquieting thrum. They seemed to possess an appetite, consuming the fading light with an unnatural hunger. It was fleeting, easily dismissed as the complaint of old pipes or settling foundations, but I was far from the main house. It was a sound without a source, a deep, resonant sigh that seemed to emanate from the very ground itself, carrying a profound sorrow. My hand instinctively went to the compass, its needle trembling slightly, not towards magnetic north, but twitching erratically as if caught in some unseen current. The discrepancies were no longer just cartographic curiosities. They were a chorus of wrongness, a growing dissonance in the landscape. My determination, once a solid core, was now laced with a tremor of apprehension. The map wasn't just incomplete, it was a key to something deeply, terrifyingly hidden. And I, Reid, had just begun to turn it in the lock. A faint, almost imperceptible hum vibrated beneath my bare feet, a tremor that spoke of concealed power, of something vital yet inert. I stretched out a hand, translucent and shimmering, towards a door at the hallway's end, but it receded with my every spectral step, an impossible distance. The rhythmic sighs intensified, pulling me deeper into their cadence, until the very air felt heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of unshed tears. Then, a sudden, jarring shift. My eyes snapped open, a gasp catching in my throat, tasting not of metal, but of the stale air of a room long sealed. The rhythmic sighing was merely the wind groaning through the ancient eaves of the estate, a sound I had come to know intimately. The anemic glow was the pale morning light struggling through the grimy panes of the tall window. I pushed myself up from the worn leather armchair where I must have drifted off, the heavy map spread across the drafting table before me. My heart, a frantic drum against my ribs, slowly began to find a more measured rhythm. A dream, I told myself, a consequence of relentless hours poured over brittle parchment, of a mind exhausted by the weight of inherited history. The stress of this place, the isolation, it was bound to fray the edges of my composure. I ran a hand over my face, the rough stubble a minor irritation. Determination, a stubborn, familiar current, still flowed through me. The map awaited. I had to finish it, to understand what the old cartographer, my ancestor, had meant to hide or reveal. A trick of the light, I mused, the old house settling, dust motes catching the dawn. Human, before it dissolved into the wainscoting. I blinked, rubbing my temples. Fatigue. Nothing more. Hours later, the sun, now a brazen glare, streamed through the window, illuminating the swirling dust motes that were the true inhabitants of this house. I was in the library, searching for a forgotten survey book that might shed light on a peculiar triangulation point on the map. It wasn't distinct, not words, merely a breathy murmur, a sibilant suggestion of sound. I froze, my hand hovering midair. Hello? I called out, my voice swallowed by the cavernous room. Only the creak of old wood answered, and the soft sigh of the wind. I shook my head, dismissing it as the house's peculiar acoustics, the groan of ancient timbers echoing my own thoughts. Yet, a prickle of unease, sharp as a splinter, found purchase beneath my skin. That evening, a more tangible disruption occurred. I had left my precise set of drafting instruments arranged on the corner of the map table, each pen and compass aligned with an almost obsessive order. Returning from a brief respite in the kitchen, I found them subtly, yet undeniably, rearranged. The ruling pen, which I always placed horizontally, now lay at a slight diagonal. The small brass weights, used to hold down the map, had been shifted a hair's breadth from their perfect square formation. It was a minor alteration, easily dismissed as my own absent-mindedness, a detail I might have misremembered. But the certainty of my meticulous nature gnawed at me. I was fastidious, especially with my tools. This was not my doing. The night brought no solace. My sleep was a fractured landscape of vivid, unsettling nightmares. I was no longer in a hospital hallway, but buried deep beneath the earth, the suffocating weight of soil pressing down. I heard faint, guttural sounds, the scraping of something immense and unseen, trying to claw its way free. I woke with a jolt, the sheets tangled around me, sweat slicking my skin, the echoes of those silent screams still ringing in my inner ear. The following morning, my rationalizations began to buckle under the strain. I returned to the map, determined to lose myself in its intricate lines, to reassert control through order and logic. But as my gaze fell upon a previously unremarkable section, a blank expanse representing the unexplored western edge of the estate, I saw it. A faint, almost translucent network of lines, barely visible, had emerged. They were not there yesterday. I was certain. These new lines formed a complex, almost organic pattern, unlike the precise geometric surveys of the known property. They seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light, an ephemeral glow that only I could perceive. And within this new, disturbing web, tiny, almost microscopic symbols had appeared, glyphs that writhed like trapped insects, symbols I had never seen in any cartographic text. My breath hitched. My hand, steady for decades over countless maps, now trembled. This was beyond fatigue, beyond the tricks of an old house, beyond the stress of isolation. The map, my anchor to logic and reason, was shifting beneath my very gaze. It was no longer a static document of the past, it was a living, breathing entity, revealing its secrets not by my hand, but by some unseen, malevolent will. The estate was not merely influencing my mind, it was reaching out, pressing in, its ancient secrets bleeding onto the very parchment I held so dear.